we're back. So thank you so much, everyone watching from home. We're back with the next panel. To everyone here, of course, thank you for staying with us. And the next panel will, of course, look at something that to me is particularly interesting, which is how do you combine technology, art, science, with this context of innovation, particularly so we make the transition into green. And for that, the panel will be moderated by José Luis de Vicente, who of course comes from Barcelona. He works a lot with SonarD, which I'm sure you know very well. He would lead the discussion, and now I leave the floor to him. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, bonjour, bon dia, everyone. Thanks for joining us here and also joining us from home. My name is José Luis de Vicente. As I said, I'm a curator and researcher, and I've been working for many years in the space that we're going to try to map a little bit in this session and fill with questions. This session is called Integrating Science, Art, and Technology in something that I think is starting to shape up, which is the notion of a European model of innovation. And before going to our incredible participants that are both here and also online, I wanted to give a certain context to what is this idea. The idea first, that there is such a thing which is a common space where the arts, technology, and science come together, and that there is a tradition and even a history of this being part of a European model of innovation. So let me run a little bit through some things. I can get my presentation here. So yeah, there will have been no Bauhaus without the famous Bauhaus parties. For those of you that you know, the Bauhaus had this very important tradition, almost practice, of gathering celebratory events in which all participants would collaborate across disciplines to make incredible costumes. And these costumes would be representing industry, would represent technology. Some of the most famous ones would represent metal. And the tradition of the costumes in the Bauhaus show a side of the Bauhaus that was very, very important, which was, this was not only a place for inventing, for revolutionizing industry and the shape of the constructed world and the everyday. This was very importantly a place for the imagination and for creative experimentation, open in multiple ways, without the specific parameters that had to be goal-oriented. So these are things that we know about innovation and the way that it works, that we need spaces. And there's a role for non-purposeful creative exploration, for doing things that don't necessarily have to pan out instantly in predictive ways. Also for unstructured play. This notion of play, of course, is very important in creative processes. So if you have play that is not goal-oriented or discipline-driven, you may find interesting results and places. And these parties, this is also very important, would be a great space for the Bauhaus to tell to the public, to the general audience, what the Bauhaus was about. They were also an interface with society. So there's actually a tradition of an idea that you cannot create models of innovation that don't look at these things, at unstructured play, at not purpose-driven experimentation, and looking about society and the places that, the things that are on the other side of the space of research. In a way that there is a connection or a tradition, and follow me here, between the laboratory and the party. That what happens in the lab and what happens at the party are not necessarily two different things that don't have anything to do with each other, but that both of them fit on each other on interesting ways. So for instance, this hasn't kind of like well described. Maybe you know about this place, Black Rock City. This is the famous city that is constructed out of nowhere every year for the Burning Man Festival. And the Burning Man Festival is this big event in Utah in the desert where thousands of people gather to create and produce machines collaboratively, without a driven purpose, without an objective, just to make an experiment in conviviality, in living together for a few days. And it's very well documented and analyzed that there is a relationship between the workforce of Silicon Valley, of the tech industry, and this space. And I'm not saying it, Fred Turner, who is probably the most well-known historian of Silicon Valley, explains what is the connection between the space of Silicon Valley and the space of Burning Man, the laboratory and the party, the space of unstructured play. Now, I have a bit of an interest here because this is my laboratory. This is Sonar Festival in Barcelona. It's been going on, next year will be for 30 years. And if you look at it from the outside, it may not really look like a laboratory. It looks way more like a party. But this is a place where scientists, musicians, hackers, artists, entrepreneurs, academics sit around a table outside of this safe space of their disciplines, outside of the safe space of what is happening there. I love it that once a magazine, the Time Out magazine, made a list of all the big music festivals in Europe and gave a tag to each of them. And for Sonar, the tag was, it's a festival for ravers with PhDs. And actually, I love this definition because there is a reason why you would need a space for ravers with PhDs, or there is a space between the rave and the structured space of research. This is what the lab looks about. This is Sonar Plus D. This is the area in which for the last 10 years, we've built this anti-disciplinary cross-pollination space of academics, artists, practitioners, technologies working together. I love this book. This book is very amazing because it tells a very important story. Orlando Figes wrote in this book called The Europeans, the story of how in the 19th century, the train created a model of European culture. Without the train, there would have not been opera. There would not have been literature as it existed because the train allowed for a circulation of ideas to an extent that didn't happen before and created something that we could call European culture. What is the train of today? And have we produced these models for European culture today? I absolutely believe that we have. So for instance, if you sing as something, again, please bear with me, as electronic music culture, as club culture in Europe, this is a culture that was produced by the Schengen Treaty and by cheap flying. Because whether in the cavernous space of Berghain in Berlin or in the beaches of Ibiza, in the cliffs of Ibiza, people are European. Club culture is a European artifact. It doesn't really include its national variabilities. And electronic music, which was invented globally, really became, in Europe in the 90s, a global culture for the 21st century that didn't exist before. And I also think the new media art culture history, the electronic art in that time now, new media, art space was the same. Organizations like Ars Electronica in Austria, Transmediale in Germany, Sonar in Spain, many, many others all over the continent created a collective sense of a collective culture that fused art, technology together in ways that we didn't know before. What has this have to do with innovation? You may know this story because there's even a Netflix show about it. In 1996, the art collective Art & Com in Berlin invents this technology, which is basically the possibility to take satellite photographies, put them on a globe, and zoom in and zoom out. Of course, this is a very famous product, 20 years before it was a product. 20 years before of that, it was an art project. The space of the research between technology and artists has produced many ideas that later arrived to society in multiple ways. So for instance, this is an icon of European art technology, Arduino. Arduino is a cheap technology for microprocessors that allows people without knowledge of electronics to program and devise complex technological systems. It was invented in a design school in Italy for artists, the Interaction Institute of Ivrea. So Europe has been making these sort of contributions for a long time. But more than that, we have been building it, believing with initiatives. Probably the most important scientific institution in Europe, CERN, the Laboratory for Particle Physics, has an artist in residence program, has an art program that has been going on for 10 years, creating incredible results. And even before the European Bauhaus, there was something like STARS. STARS is the Science, Technology and the Arts program of the European Commission that basically says that the collaboration between the arts and industry can foster innovation and can create new forms of participation and new forms of innovation in multiple ways. The STAR Prize that is given every year, and actually, I think on Monday, the STAR Prize 2022 is announced, is a great collection of examples of how artists, entrepreneurs, and scientists are working together, producing results, both in the spaces of the arts that have an impact or can have an impact in the spaces of industry. Let me give you an example, and to finish with one example. This is something that we did in October. This is a collaboration between a Berlin-based artist, musician Holly Herdon, and a Barcelona-based tech company, Boctro Labs. Holly Herdon is one of the most important people working today with artificial intelligence and the human voice. So she has created a full model of her voice that allows to anybody to sing with her voice. So with Boctro Labs, which is a Barcelona-based company, and with the funding of the STARS program and with the funding of the European Union, they developed the first ever example of what is called timbre transfer. And timbre transfer is the idea that you can take a mic, sing with your voice, but what people will hear will be somebody else's voice. So the first ever presentation of this did not happen in a paper reading in a conference. It didn't happen on Silicon Valley. It happened on a music festival in Europe, and it looked like this. Can we play the video, please? So what you're going to see here is Barcelona-based singer Maria Arnal singing with the voice of Holly Herdon. So she's singing with her natural voice. And now the model takes her voice and sends it through Holly's voice. And also it's funny because Holly is a German electronic musician, and here she's singing in a flamenco tessiture, which is obviously not part of her tradition. Next. So there is like a... That's it. So yeah, there's like a few questions that I think are important, that are interesting to look at. What is the role, or what can be the role of the arts in the ecosystem of innovation? If artists are researchers, what is the value of what they do as a form of research? How do they contribute to producing knowledge outside of the spaces of the arts? How do they have an impact outside the spaces of the arts? And also, how are they supporting their practices to different spaces from the arts? This is, to me, kind of like a frame or telling a story of what would it mean having an European model of innovation versus the American one versus the Chinese one, in which the arts are an essential component or part of it. And for this, we have 5 speakers today, 5 participants from different sectors, different contexts, and from all over the continent, and they have different takes and different ways of applying ideas about this very open notion of an European model of innovation that considers culture, considers the arts as one central element of it. So the first of them is Christoph de Jager. He's the founder and director of Gluon. Gluon is one of the many organizations that we have in Europe that look specifically at this point, how create hybrid research environments where artists, scientists, and technologists can sit one with each other to make different kind of questions and to produce new forms of answers. So thank you for being with us, Christoph.
Thank you, Jose. So I prepared a little presentation for 5 minutes. And we were requested by the organizers to make a statement, which I did quite quickly, but afterwards I thought maybe I have to explain a little bit the statement. So it was about the necessity of discussions. When we think about art, science, technology collaborations, we very often think in terms of concrete outputs, be it prototypes, be it artworks. But I think what is also important is to have real discussions, and that is not easy. When you bring researchers, entrepreneurs, industrialists, and artists together, it's not an easy thing to do. And if you look at how we organize ourselves, it's very much in silos. When we speak in the cultural world, we speak for artists, entrepreneurs speak for other entrepreneurs, but it's very seldom that they really go in real discussions. And I think this is very important. And it is a nice term by Michel Foucault, it's heterotopia. We have to create a world within worlds where these real discussions are possible. It should be a discomforting place, a place where you can transform, a place where you can be honest, and a place where you can be an utopian, but also a dystopian. That should all come together. I think this is important. And I just wanted to give an example of one of the most nice discussions I had. This is Stefan Grosjean. He's a top industrialist in Belgium, and he created SMAPI. This is a tool to measure the consumption of electricity of household tools. And he became incredibly wealthy with this. He's really an industrialist with an interest in art. And of course, he, as an industrialist, he believes that technology will save the world. And many of them do that. And they don't think that culture can be so important. He was, for example, always referring at ITER. He says the time is short with climate change. People will not change their behavior. Technology will have to save us. And he gave the example of ITER, which is in the south of France, where they're building a plant for nuclear fusion, and then believing that this new entity will make sure that in 30 years we don't depend on oil anymore or on or fossil fuels in general. But that is the mindset of many industrialists. Technology is going to save us. And he had the discussion with Luc Deleu. He's a Belgian artist, and I thought within the context of Bauhaus, it's interesting to mention him. He calls himself an urbanist, so he's not creating for Belgium, but he creates architecture on a world scale, because you have to think on a world scale if you have to find solutions today. And he has a completely different take than Stefan Grosjean on how we can save the world today. For him, we have to change our behavior. We have to put the last building in Belgium. This was the last stone that he built it in the 80s because he didn't want to create architecture anymore. He said, we don't need technology because technology, needs more energy than before. We have to change our behavior. We have to wear warm clothes. We have to look at how we lived in the past. So I think this is really important in the discussion when we bring art, industry, and science together, that we also take into account the artists, and also in Bauhaus. And then I think about Bruno Latour, who says we need to change our behavior, but if we do that, we need to create another belief system. In his writings on Gaia, he explained this very well. And there are two different projects. I worked then with Gluon in an European context. This was STARTS. I think this is really something for Stefan Grosjean, is bringing artists into the R&D of companies or universities and create prototypes. It can be quite functional. But we created a reversal model, which was Studiotopia, where we wanted to bring researchers and industrialists in the studio of artists. So to change the hierarchies. Because normally artists, when they go, and we see it in many older art, science, technology collaborators, we bring the artists out of their comfort zone, but never the industrialists or the researchers. So this is what we try to do with Studiotopia, but COVID didn't make it very easy for us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Christoph. Our next presenter could not be here today at the last minute, so he can join us for Zoom. He is Florian Kohler. He's the CEO of Moon Paper, and he, in a way, is probably the most important representative of industry in this session. Moon Paper is a big historical paper company which was founded in 1829 and is very much involved in the transition to a post-carbon world. Florian, I don't know if you can join us now. Yeah, can you hear us? Yeah, I'm afraid we cannot hear him, or at least I cannot.
Should I mute?
No. Yeah?
Can you all hear me now?
Now, yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so a big hello, and as we say in Bavaria, Servus beieinander. Yes, I do represent Moon Paper. Moon Paper, my company is 193 years old, and that is Europe. Because Europe, we have tradition, we have heritage, but we have the big desire to create new things. And I'm always saying the best startup year in Bavaria was 1829. And now the point is, why is heritage so important for Europe? I'm saying this because in computer, and even if we give billions into the computer industry in Europe, sorry, but it's going to happen in Silicon Valley and in China. However, cultural products, the Americans, the Chinese, everybody looks at us, they all envy us. And so my vision is for Europe and also for our company that we take more care of the creative know-how we have. More specifically, the vision is now that we create Mund am Tegernsee the world's only color laboratory. Why do I say this? Because color is so important, and we have a technology, but we don't have the funds like a big multinational. We have the technology to invent new colors. And sometimes people are not aware how important color is in design. And I have two little examples. First example is when you have a baby, within the 10 first words of the baby is ball, is mama, maybe papa, I don't know. But there's red. Red is one of the first words of a baby. So it shows you how important color is in design. And it's so obvious that we don't think enough about it. And I have another example. Let's take famous brands, let's take Ferrari. If tomorrow we would say Ferrari is not allowed to use red anymore, the company would go bankrupt.
Non hai l'abitudine di fare television, live TV.
And therefore, I think it's so important that we in Europe take more care of natural products and of colors. Because natural products are so important for us, This year, we have also now started a company in France where only on base of recycled natural fibers, we create colored materials. And now I come to the main point. We are in the world where everybody says, yeah, we need this digital, this digital, this digital. I'm making a strong statement. I'm saying that the only thing that counts in the world is analog. I drink an analog tea. When you go into Google Maps and you're looking for the restaurant, then this digital only helps you to find the analog food. And I think we over-exaggerate the digital. Digitals are instruments, are assistants, are fictions. And we in Europe are strong for real things. There's the Eiffel Tower, there's the Oktoberfest, it's the real things. And therefore, my vision again is to say, let's create an art and design, which is very typical European. Let's create the center of the world for color. That's my vision. And people come and we will make for them the color. And one day, Mr. Apple will come to Bavaria, to Gmund, because this is where he will get the best color. And therefore, I strive for Europe for creating and producing analog products. By the end, only color changes our world, and only natural products are what we want. As the other gentleman said, technology does not change the world. The plastic consumption goes up every year. But if we create natural fiber products which are beautiful, then the analog design will enrich people and say, yeah, I want to use this analog natural color product. So this is the spirit from Bavaria I want to send to Brussels as far as this is concerned.
Thank you so much, Dennis. I found very inspiring this idea of the invention of new colors, and I think it's actually a very good example of the need of cross-pollination between the arts and industry, because industry will, of course, invent the new colors, but artists, designers, and creative minds will be the ones who actually will make sense of those new colors. So that's a very nice bridge. We also have, unfortunately, not on stage, but thankfully here on stage, Dennis Pamling. He's the Director of Mission Innovation's Net Zero Assessment Initiative. I think he represents in this conversation very clearly the transition to the post-carbon world and the role also of ideas, of creativity, of inspired thinking to reach this, which is undoubtedly the most important problem that we have today in the world and the biggest challenge that we have, taking the way of the path that the Paris Agreement lays in front of us, saying that, and I have to remind these numbers, and every occasion that I have, I remind them, in 8 years, in 2030, we should be releasing a 55% less CO2 into the atmosphere than we did in 1990. And in 2050, we should be releasing zero CO2 to the atmosphere in total emissions. This is the biggest challenge of our times, and of course, it has to be present in this conversation. Thank you so much, Dennis.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah. And I think this is one of the most important discussions. You know, I'm coming from a very science, hard industry-based discussion. We are in a situation where we talk about net zero, and it's very much about technology. But that is from what we call a static problem approach. And here's where I think the integration of science, arts, and technology needs to be looked at two very different ways. Because in the current situation, when we talk about climate and societal challenges, we look at existing sectors and we look at problems. And then we say, how can, for instance, the big emitters reduce less emissions? And that is important. We need to have that conversation. But what we are doing now in Mission Innovation, the UNFCCC, which is the organization who is guiding us towards a low carbon economy, is expanding the innovation agenda. So what we want to talk about now is not the existing sectors, it's human needs. And we don't only want to talk about the problems and those who create those. We want to discuss the solution providers. And if we look at the integration of science, arts, and technology, in the first static problem approach, we look at current industries and the current situations and current problems, art becomes a little bit of an inspiration. It becomes something that helps us shape the design or the color or something of existing solutions. So we get a better computer, or we get a better car, or we get a better airplane, we get an internal design in something. But if we shift the perspective towards human needs, all of a sudden, arts and science is the very purpose of society. So it's not meant to inspire industry. It's not about helping to solve the problem. It is part of the solution. So when we look at the lives we want to live, the society we want to create, we need to make sure that we have healthy food, we can live in certain ways, and that's where traditional sustainability stops. But for the expanded innovation zone, the very reason for living is basically art and science. Once you have these basic things, you expand and you build society. And that's where we think the new integration of science, arts, and technology, it's not about integrating them to solve the problem. It's about redefining the way forward. And that's where I think the new European Bauhaus has a unique opportunity to really challenge the current sustainability discussions, the current technology focus, and expand that and say, we in the art community in particular is not just meant to help you solve the problems. We are the very essence and reasons that society exists. And I hope many people, what we feel in art when they come to us in the science and technology sphere, they come too humble. They want to help with the current systems, rather than to say, whatever you do, whatever society you try to create, at the focus, you need to have art and science as what we create here. So that's really what I want to focus on. And if you look at that on a very national scale, on a local scale, you can look at the sort of art here on the side, and then you have all this work with trying to reduce emissions from cars, reduce emissions from food, etc. Or you ask the question in the expanded innovation agenda, how does people live flourishing lives? And people can live flourishing lives through theater, through arts in many ways, instead of buying a super yacht or something. So art is also part of asking us, what is that beautiful life we want to live? And here's where I think Europe really can take the lead in asking that, because many other cultures, when they get rich, they just want to consume. And I think Europe has a history, and someone was alluding to that earlier, where there's a bit of an envy from other parts and saying, when we get rich, we don't necessarily need to consume more. We want to create more art. We want to create more science. And if we can bring that back and really own that in this new tradition and really help us also as innovators and those who create these innovation strategies, I think we could take great leaps forward. So that's why I'm really happy to be here and really to be engaging this dialogue, both with you physically and all you here out in the digital sphere. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dennis. And that was a very inspiring appeal to something that I think we all share, which is what is a good life and what is the role that creation has, one of our bare necessities has been covered. Of course, when we talk about Europe, we cannot help talking not about the culture only that we are producing today, but the huge space that we are have inherited, the common legacy that we all share, that we preserve, that we protect, but it also projects us towards the future, towards this new future that we're trying to build. This is, of course, heritage, the incredibly rich heritage that Europe has to preserve and that belongs to all of us. Snezka Kwadliec is the Secretary General for Europa Nostra. It's the voice of heritage for civil society. We're very fortunate to have it here with us in this discussion that I think projects us in this relationship of how do preserving our relationship with the past launches us to the new ways that we have to think about the future. Thank you so much for being here today.
No, thank you so much, and thank you for the organizers and you as well to including the voice of cultural heritage in the discussion, because I suppose that's not, for many people, that's not obvious at all. Because, what does cultural heritage has to do with innovation? And and I'm also a civil society activist for Europe and cultural heritage. So, but I suppose there was a purpose for inviting me to be part of this indeed vital conversation. And I was thinking all the time, am I here, by accident? But then when I heard Florian, I was, it made my day to hear that the representative of the business community is in fact recalling that sort of technology and all sort of development of technology, this is something which is an instrument that we have to help us improve our life and our living environment, but that we also have a huge know-how, huge knowledge that is embedded in our cultural heritage. And our cultural heritage is not only material, it is also immaterial. And there is so much savoir-faire, savoir-vivre, and that some of this has been forgotten. And in a sense, all the crises, environmental crises and climate crisis that we are now living is a consequence of the humankind sort of abandoning that enormous corpus of knowledge that humankind have sort of assembled and then at some point sort of put aside. So that means that our message and my message for this conversation is that innovation, it should not just be innovation, l'innovation pour l'innovation. Innovation has to have a meaning, has to have a purpose, and that purpose has to be a value-based innovation. And that value-based innovation, what kind of values? I would say the 3 E's, which I like very much, the ecological, ethical, and aesthetical values that are very much also sort of at the heart of the New European Bauhaus initiative. So that's, message number 1. And message number 2, indeed, that innovation also, and if we are talking about what is then the specificity of a European innovation model, it is also innovation with tradition, with sort of putting into this ecosystem also that traditional knowledge. Traditional material, Florian was speaking about the color, but we can talk about many traditional materials, traditional ways of building our living space. I mean, take this building where we are. This is the largest, after the renaissance of the Gare Maritime, the largest timber construction in Europe. So timber is coming back. Well, this has been for centuries used as a very environmental friendly and sustainable material. So it is sort of learning from that ancestral intelligence. I'm now quoting my very good colleague and friend who will be speaking this afternoon together with President von der Leyen, Alexandra Mitsotakis, president of a World Human Forum. She always says that we have to connect one AI with another AI, which is the artificial intelligence with ancestral intelligence, and that is the winning combination. And the third message in this opening statement is indeed what is very important in the model of that European innovation model is all these collaborations and partnerships and multidisciplinarity, and having us here, the art, heritage, science, technology, all that together, it is when we strike the right balance between all of that, and we include not just the people who are developing technologies or the researchers, etc., but involve the artists and civil society, who are not just the beneficiaries of innovation, they are also part of that process, and a part of the innovation, which is not just technological, it is social, it is environmental, it is basically something that also has to have a heart. And so that's my last point. It's innovation with a meaning and with a heart.
Thank you so much. We're thinking about ancestral intelligence as one of the things that will lead us very fast, but also in other scales of time. Time, I think, is also part of this conversation to the place that we're going. And finally, the last of our speakers is Varvara Videra. She's an associate professor at the Václav University of Science and Technology. She's an architect, first architect on the panel, not bad. And she's been involved with the New European Bauhaus Initiative in different levels and in different contexts. She's a big supporter, as we all are, of the vision. And of course, the notion going back to the shape of the world and the built environment and the space in which we all will live together in these new scenarios that we're going to are very important in the context of this conversation. Thank you so much, Barbara.
Thank you. Good morning, or already now. It's still good morning. And I'm absolutely happy and proud to be here. And I'm happy that we are here together. because this means that we share one vision, the vision of the new European Bauhaus, and it also means to me that we are here in the beautiful Saturday morning because we want this vision to become something more than beautiful utopia and a nice to have initiative. So let me start with the fact that I'm actually very, very proud to be European. It's as a person, of course, especially now, as a researcher and as an architect. And as an architect here in this panel, I feel like a kind of missing link or maybe connecting link because architecture is all about it. If you think one of the reasons why I'm proud to be European is because all major styles in art and architecture originated in Europe. And it's not about the lack of respect for other cultures, but it is about our cultural heritage. So it's not without a reason I'm sitting next to Śnieżka. And indeed, our culture, European culture, has been a constant inspiration to the world for ages. And you, as a real Spanish guy, you started with the parties. This is absolutely great. And indeed, Bauhaus in 20th century was an amazing experience. Experiment. Experience definitely also. But as an architect, I appreciate the parties, of course, but I need to mention as well that they aimed at development of new building models to provide people with affordable, modern, functional dwellings, but also to maintain the highest level of aesthetics. Because with the unique experience, with the unique harmony that can be achieved in a work of art, we feel authentic pleasure, whether it's about music, beautiful voices, paintings, sculptures, but also buildings, parks, gardens. But the Bauhaus in 20th century was a huge revolution. And as they wanted to provide people with contact with nature, with contact with art, with open space, beautiful solutions, daylighting, natural ventilation. But they wanted to do it in the shortest possible time, in the cheapest possible price, and at the highest level. So this may sound a little bit over-optimistic at the best case, right? But let me remind you that this movement has actually conquered the world for 100 years. However, the new aesthetics of these truly revolutionary forms was not always understood by the society, including the citizens who needed it the most, the so-called new working class, the ones to whom it was dedicated. And this is one of the reasons why today, New European Bauhaus combines our cultural heritage with groundbreaking research and innovation. And I argue that the fact that this initiative is supported with Horizon Europe, this is something that we really need to embrace. We need to connect the research-based technologies, nature-based solutions, and the art and beauty. And when President von der Leyen announced the new European Bauhaus, to me it was like she would say to the world, you may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one, right? And this is how I feel about this initiative, because New European Bauhaus, if you think about it, this is the next revolution, and this is the initiative that offers unprecedented opportunities to combine our culture, to transform the built environment, using the best of advanced technologies while learning from the nature. So we need to redesign our cities. We need to move from this fossil fuel thinking. So we need to do it, as Francesca elegantly explained it yesterday, based on smart communication networks, based on sustainable fossil-free mobility, but also, and maybe above all, on understanding of biological systems. And it must be done in a co-creative way. Because when people don't understand something, it's done behind their back, they would not be willing to accept it, and they even may reject it. So whatever we design today must respect our cultural heritage. Being, however, open for innovativeness, for contemporary aesthetics, definitely for optimal performance, for renewable energy. But it's not just about technology. These three elements, sustainable, beautiful together, I don't want to mix them. I really want to use them together. And I believe we need to embrace interdisciplinarity. We need to change our way of thinking, because only this way we can leave something valuable to the next generation. So hopefully they can look into the future with a little bit more optimism and enthusiasm, especially in these difficult times. And obviously we need to share the action with the youth, starting from the level of very basic education, through the academic education, and especially what's really critical to me, the education of young architects, because this will be their responsibility to stop the climate change. And this education should embrace the spirit of New European Bauhaus, and we need to make this cooperation with young people a real partnership. So I believe we are doing this together, to provide the world with a new source of inspiration coming from Europe, once again. But above all, I believe we are doing this to protect our planet. So you may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one.
Thank you, Varvara. I think now we have plenty of time to have a conversation about, probably we are all dreamers here, and we share a certain utopia, that is for sure. So I think that the moment when things start becoming more complicated is one, when we go from utopia to heterotopia, as you were mentioning, Christoph, which is that what is this utopia made of? Second, what are the challenges? What are the problems that we have to solve to arrive to that vision? And third, what is this plan? What is this plan made of? When we say, what is the plan? Let's start to actually defining goals, defining mechanisms. And probably this is the moment in which we are, in this notion of the beautiful vision of the new European Bauhaus being an inspiration and an utopia, a guiding light maybe, but now we have to start coming down to the details. So I wanted to talk a little bit, first maybe about the challenges, and then about the essential points on the manifestos. You have mentioned, Christoph, the notion of silos. And it's true that one of the challenges that we have is that we may, as much as we want, think about these spaces that exist across the boundary of silos, but these still exist. And this actually, they build institutions, they build funding models, they build production of knowledge. So first of all, and it's open to everybody, how do we transition to a world, the world of a new European Bauhaus maybe, where the architecture of the institutions, the models of funding, and even the way we communicate and explain this to society transcends these notions of the silos. This notion of over here is science, over here are the entrepreneurs, over here are the strange, wacky artists, and these people in the end can talk to each other, but they're fundamentally different. How does a model that overcomes this start looking like? And here I'm thinking about inspirations, stories, or even desires from all of us. And this goes for everybody. Can you take it, Christoph? Or Barbara?
You want to start?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
If I may start,
Yeah.
I think it is because it's not about us and them, or us and you, or whatever, but it's about us. It's one planet. So again, it may sound like over-optimistic, but we have to do it together. And indeed, this initiative is already at the very early stage. So it's not a ready-to-eat thing like McDonald's or whatever. You just pay for it, you go, or you come and you ask, okay, so what can you offer? No, it's very open to society. And in my life, it's the first time when I can experience something like this. That in the heart of Europe, we are asked, what is the solution? And I think we are here because we want to be a part of the solution. Without waiting, without maybe being a little bit disappointed that politicians did it the other way. So coming out of silos to me means to really start a dialogue. And any initiative, anything was born. In Poland, we say Krakow was not built in one day, right? So New European Bauhaus is not going to build in one day. And I'm sure that the fact that the scientists, researchers, entrepreneurs, artists, and I'm really sorry if I have not mentioned something, architects, right? If we are trying to develop some new solutions, it means it is a real participation. So I think one of the problems for Bauhaus was that they wanted to talk to society, but they wanted to talk them into their idea because they believed the art of Mondrian and Malevich, it represents the perfect harmony. So it was about explaining. And the only thing actually, in my opinion, that was really missing, and it was introduced in 20th century, was the participation and co-creation and pluralism and respect to other points of view, to other ideas. So now if we combine it, I'm pretty sure it can work. That's why I'm here.
Yes, we are dreamers, but we are more than that.
Practically.
I think we are also acting. We are acting, and I think it's already happening. A lot is happening, and that is what I think the beauty of this whole exercise is that the president launched out of the blue for many of us the new European Bauhaus initiative, and then suddenly so many people gather around and said, but we are already in some way participating already. The movement, in a sense, is already en marche. And that's why I think the number of partners that came, and also I think that at the beginning the president didn't think at all that heritage people have anything to do with it. And we immediately said, nous répondons présent, we are here and we are part of that. And of course with the prizes that will be shown this afternoon, and also, for example, the prizes, Europa Nostra is well known. We organized with the European Union the European Heritage Awards, Europa Nostra Awards already this year. We celebrate 20th anniversary. I can tell you, every year, the wealth of extraordinary, exemplary achievements, and many of them are based on innovative approaches to tackling whatever problems or whatever sort of issue they are tackling. So we have that. We have also launched something which is called an Illucidare special prizes, which is innovation, heritage-led innovation. Again, and we also got a number of initiatives. So the good news is a lot is already happening, and a lot of this cross-pollination, I love that, cross-pollination is already happening. But the fact that the European Commission, from the highest level, and all the European institutions are now sort of promoting this new European Bauhaus, it is giving us a sort of, putting a spotlight and giving us an opportunity to amplify and to sort of go further in destroying all those walls between the silos and working much more together, and the words together, which is so much part of the philosophy of the new European Bauhaus.
Yes, and I want to add something practical to what you said. There are indeed many initiatives that are already part of this new Bauhaus movement. I think, for example, on Ars Electronica or ZKM or Sonar Festival. But what is really interesting for the different member states is that the way Europe functions. So the commissioners work together. Commissioners for youth, commissioners for work, commissioners for innovation. They work together and they create programs together in which cross-sectoriality can happen. And in many other member states of the European Union, this is still not a given.
That's a very important point.
No, but now we have a commissioner who is just collecting it all. I'm only afraid that she will collapse because the task is enormous. But innovation, education, science, culture, and youth, everything together, that's the way forward.
Not to forget climate.
And connecting with climate.
Dennis and Florian, I don't want to forget about you because I always know that the remote speakers get the worst part of the Q&As. So please, if you want to contribute to this question.
Yeah, if you want, I give a point in this.
Yeah.
In this in this podium, I'm the small businessman because we are a small company. And when I listen to all what you say, I'm also enchanted by the new Bauhaus initiative. Though I think we have to take care about one thing. In Europe, we tend to speak too much about beautiful things, and then the Americans take it, or the Chinese, and they make money with it. and that's a big danger, because by the end, art needs money and art can make money. If we in Europe only make art which needs money, long term we're gonna have a problem. And that's why I'm striving for, and that's why I love this new initiative about the new Bauhaus. Let's think about how we can create, and I know it in my own company as an example with this color laboratory, parts where art and science is so European that tomorrow the Americans and the Chinese will come to us and they will ask our heritage, our know-how, our creative innovation. And I think that's the master point as far as business is concerned. Innovation is not bits and bitcoins and that stuff. This is also innovation. But the real innovation is what people love to use to take. Somebody has said it before, very good cooking. Cooking is so analog. And that's why I'm striving for trying to use this new initiative to help small, middle companies to bring out innovative, analog, environment-friendly products, which the other ones want then to buy, and I'm saying very loud, to buy from Europe, because when they buy it from us, we have employment and we pay tax, and tax makes Europe running. So I'm a big fan of tax paying. So let's make the others buy our products, and they are just more beautiful and more art innovative.
Dennis, do you have anything to say?
Yes. I think this is a very important conversation in terms of moving away from the very conceptual into something very concrete. One thing that we have seen from the international perspective, where Europe is actually not very good, it's global. Europe often forgets that the wealth and the art and all the prosperity we have is built on other people's resources. And with 11 billion people soon living on this planet, we need to ask the fundamental questions. Are what we produce 11 billion compatible? Can 11 billion people live with this architecture, enjoy this art, listen to music, walk in the park, using these kind of natural resources? We've been so used to using the resources of Latin America, Africa, and Asia that we have forgotten that Europe is not built on Europe. Europe is built on the planet. Others are now want to live similar lives. So we need to ask that very question in saying, are Europe ready to transform and move into a new state where 11 billion filter is at the very core of our innovation? And that is what I also would like to say then. We need to move into the human needs perspective. We focus way too much on trying to improve our old structures and way too little on saying, take a step back and saying, how do we want to live tomorrow? So I think that's a little bit what Europe is sometimes tied into. You know, I love our heritage, etc., but our heritage is not our old industries. Our heritage is not our old business ideas, our old structure. We need to be much more open to how we live tomorrow and what are the things that Europe can be part of. And for everything, I hope it will also be international corporations. This is not something that someone will buy from us or we will sell to someone other. It is who will we co-create this with and who will we jointly provide this to the world with. All major corporations, even small startups now, they are collaborating from the very start. So I hope also the new European Bauhaus will be a global collaboration platform, building on Europe's history, but also bringing it into the global community where people view themselves as European, absolutely, but also as global citizens, because we're moving into space and a time where people might not necessarily define themselves on countries and regions, but also as global citizens, not exclusively, but as a large part. And for that to be a part, we really need to rethink our institutions. And as you said in the opening here, how do we break the old silos? But I think we also need to acknowledge there will be new silos, but those silos will be redirected to the future, to the human needs. The current sectors today are in silos. Those are based on the old industrial economy, on transportation, buildings, not on human needs. So that's also something to reconsider in terms of not just opening up and say we will just do, work in chaos, but we will need new collaborations, new clusters coming together. And that's also where I think the new European Bauhaus can be the home of those new 11 billion centered clusters for human needs.
Thank you, Dennis. There's something that you said that I want to go back to in a second, which is the idea of how do we live tomorrow, which is, I think, is very hard to center. I just only wanted to comment on something that Varvara said. Of course, as the Spaniard, I pointed at the parties when I look at the Bauhaus. But actually, what I wanted to say or to explain, just to be clear, that is that in the Bauhaus, the parties were work. The parties were not party. The parties were methodology. The parties were research. And this idea that the parties would be a form of research actually has to do with this notion, which is, if we don't lose track of the end goal of the European Bauhaus, of the reason why it exists, is that it exists because we need aesthetic revolution, a cultural revolution, a creative revolution for the ecological transition. This points at something that I think is very important, and it's one of the things that Europe can actually forge, or that maybe is leading globally right now. When I look at the problem of the ecological transition, of the arriving to the post-net zero world, we sometimes look at it from the technological perspective, which new technology will we invent. We many times look at it from the political. Is there a political will? Is there a will to comply with the commitments of emission reduction that we have decided? Is there an economic model that is created for that? But a lot of this is also, of course, a cultural transition, which is the notion of saying that there might be other ways of living, that we are not going to only need the technology, which we will need. We are not only going to need the political will that we will need. We will also need to think that the ways in which we live is not something that we should take for granted, that other forms of living that will be developed along with the ecological, for the ecological transition are possible. And one thing that I always think and I like to say is that culture is one of the laboratories of society. It's one of the places in which we rehearse and we imagine that there are other possible ways of living, that there is nothing that we think that is completely fixed and frozen in time. I always think of the same example. We think that sleeping for 7 hours or sleeping for 8 hours all night is a normal thing, but it's a cultural artifact. People have not always slept for 7, 8 hours all night long. They sleep for 3, 4 hours, then they woke up, they do some things in bed for an hour, then they keep on sleeping. So if we can change something like our natural sleep cycles, imagine everything that we can change in terms of our form of living. So my question for everybody is, are we, as part of this utopia, thinking also about how what culture can show us and tell us is how we frame this culture that is all this cultural transformation, that is also going to be about, as you were saying, Dennis, how are we going to live tomorrow, which is probably the biggest challenge to start. And I'll give it to you because you actually gave me that sentence perfectly, and then we can continue contributing. Dennis, do you want to take it or do you want to open it?
Yes, I love that. And I think this is really at the core. And this is also where it's interesting because the science we have for climate change really basically portray two different worlds. One is when we keep the current structure and make it fossil free. That will destroy biodiversity. That will keep people in poverty. That will increase income differences. Or we change the focus to how we live, to share more, to create more, to be more cultural beings instead of consumer beings. So we move away from a culture where we are seen primarily as a consumer to ones of a citizen. So it is really clear that in the scenarios that IPCC provides, there is this shift. But what I don't see really is that we really bring that into the heart. Still in the European innovation ecosystem, it's very much about the idea that there is a technology that needs to be brought to the market. It's not the kind of sense that we need to rethink our systems, how we live. And I think that's really, if the new European Bauhaus can bring together those kind of conversations and not have art at one part and technology at another part, but the benefits of people and of citizens. And I think that's also where many people, especially in less affluent part, feels that art is a luxury for the middle class. That is not part of that. What they are doing is not seen as art. That is, I think, is a deep challenge for the European cultural project, because much of the work that has been coming out of the Commission and national governments has not been resonating with those who are excluded. They feel that is not our culture, that is not what we think forward. So I think really an inclusive agenda also to really see what is that everyone, and that's what we talk about, 11 billion flourishing lives. We shouldn't just lift people out of poverty. We want to have everyone have a vision of themselves living flourishing lives. And if you live a flourishing life, you give something. And if you give something, it's either or science and art. So that's where I really think we need to park it at the very center of this conversation and then ask, as you say, what is the good life? And also the kind of platforms we have. We invited Spotify and Netflix to our last event to say, what are the lifestyles that you portray as attractive? Are they people buying 250 pair of shoes and a big yacht? Or is it people enjoying art and creating music? Who are the ones that we look up to? And I think that's the deep question that we in Europe also need to ask. Who are the ones that are being portrayed as role models? Who are the influencers today? What kind of lives do they have? Who shape their forms and the way they do things in a very ad-driven, in a very marketing-driven world? We need to shift away from a more cultural, human perspective.
If I can add... If I can add to this, where we can think about the future, I was thinking about a beautiful project. It's the Black Mountain College that was in the States and that was founded by Dewey and where many artists from the Bauhaus went to. And it was another way of educating, it was another way of living for the students. So they were making art, but they also had to grow vegetables in the gardens. They really had to survive in the college. And there was technology, but there was also the connection with nature, which is something that we really need. And I think creating these very strange spaces where the young people learn to live differently because they are the future, that is something we should look in when we look at education.
That's a very good example, thank you.
I love the statement that Dennis just made. We have to shift from being consumers to becoming really citizens, responsible, engaged citizens for the planet and for the humanity. And there, I think also, because I know that we have here in the audience representatives of the wonderful World Heritage City, Krakow, Robert Jaskowski, the role of cities. I think also there, the role of cities in this process that we are now discussing, in sort of bringing that change on the way we are living, way we are interacting with together, and way we are interacting with nature. And so in that sense, I wonder if we are really serious about the new European Bauhaus. Then also probably the title of the Vice President who has here the Commission promoting a European way of life, it should probably be changing the European way of life, because there is so much in the way we are living that is not sustainable, not beautiful, not inclusive. That means that really changing that and then also embracing and offering it also to the rest of the world, indeed, as the new way of living together as humans in harmony with nature. And there again, I think we can learn a lot from not all heritage practices. I agree with Dennis. We don't want to we have to be selective in what we are going to sort of use as an inspiration and sort of in this from, but there are a lot of practices from our heritage that can inspire that change and the way of living that is more sustainable, more beautiful, and more inclusive. But cities, definitely, we have to have them very much in, and give them more space and more power in sort of engineering that change.
If I may add something to this, because previously we said that philosophy of New European Bauhaus is already there. And also, I'm pretty convinced that the philosophy of being responsible and sharing nicely, it is also already there, while most of the politicians are not really aware of it. I'm meeting a lot of young people who are coming to my house and asking me for tap water, not bottled water. They are not buying any more plastic things. They are walking, or they reject flying, right? Because cheap flights were something amazing, something that allowed us to enjoy. But perhaps when we are talking about how to accommodate 11 billion people together, so it's also about individual choices, the power of individual choices. So the good thing in this initiative that it is, at least partially, it starts at the bottom and it goes up. So it's a bottom-up approach coming from the society. And I truly believe that that's why I said we need to join the action with the youth, because they know and they can tell us that the crisis, the climate crisis, this is their thing. It can happen during their life. So there was a beautiful sentence during the summit in Rio. If you cannot fix it, please stop breaking it, right? So this, for me, this is the most important message. And I'm absolutely very fond of relations between architecture and nature. And I do believe that we need to learn from nature, no matter in what you believe, in what kind of creative power. Anyway, there is a huge wisdom in nature. And I would like to put your attention on the fact that people cannot live without nature, but nature can easily live without people. So if we do not change, we might be eliminated as a threat, and I really don't want to see it. So we need to do everything possible to avoid it, right? This is the moment to act.
Thank you. And I really appreciate also that reference to the notion of young people transitioning from flight into back to the train, because it connects back to the beginning of the idea that maybe if the European culture of the 19th century was created by the train, the European culture of the European Bauhaus will also be created by a return to the train, or by a new utopia of high-speed trains connecting European capitals that allow for the circulation of ideas, but also conviviality.
I would challenge you with that.
I don't know.
I don't think that the train was just an instrument.
Of course.
But there were artists and there was the content of that. Train helped the dissemination.
We need symbols.
But it didn't create it.
No, we need symbols, and hydrogen planes don't seem that are going to come in 3 days. That's not going to be fast. So we're going to need like...
Dennis is contributing already to this initiative, right? You couldn't fly and join us.
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
I would like to add something to this as well, if it's...
yes, of course.
I would like to be a little bit more into the discussion. Dennis, I disagree with you. I don't think we should go from consumer to citizens for two reasons. Why is the word always or? Why is the word not and? We have radio and internet. We have cars and bicycles. Let's stop with the or. An or is always saying no to something. This is one point I'm saying. The second point I'm saying is, I'm sure, Dennis, and I don't want to offset you, you're just for me now the protagonist. I'm sure you have an iPhone or something similar. So you are a very heavy consumer. And the point is, Apple makes a turnover which is bigger than most countries of Europe. That's why I'm striving for, let's create positive, beautiful, natural, analog products here in Europe, where people would use them. At the moment in our school where my kids are, every kid gets an iPad. And then a year later, we are all striving, how can we get them off the digital? Let's be a little bit more realistic. When I go to schools and I give children colored papers, I sometimes do that, I have eye-openers you cannot imagine. My hobby is to bike the world, and I biked a few years ago through Nepal, Tibet. They would be unhappy with an iPhone. They are so happy. But we cannot live with 11 billion people without consumption, because we don't get taxed. And we cannot help people who are not as well off as we are. And that's why, please, let's create together European, analog, beautiful, artful products, which, yes, the Americans buy and they pay tax for it. Because a little side note, Apple doesn't pay tax in Europe. We pay 50% tax here in Europe. I want to have a more equal world where everybody pays the same tax and where the beautiful, hopefully creative product will have a little more market share and very innovative. So Dennis, I'm fully up with you. Those products should be innovative, different from what we had, and that not everybody at the end of the day only looks in his iPhone.
We have only 5 minutes, and I want to finish with something very important to me, which is the plan. The 21st century has been very rich in technological utopias, and I think it's interesting, many have been mentioned these days, that the role of Europe in many times has been that of resistance, of saying yes, but, or saying, yeah, well, that might not be that easy. There was the utopia of the smart city, the idea that technology would make our cities more efficient. Europe sort of started to say, like, well, it's a bit more complex than that, and actually, we have to take that carefully. There was the utopia of sharing everything, and Europe with the GDPR and actually the back protection of privacy and data and the protection of data sets, like, well, that also may end up having problems. It definitely had problems. In a way, the European Bauhaus is a utopia that is being forged here, which is this idea that in order to solve these huge challenges, we will need science, we need tech, we need entrepreneurship, and we need the arts together. So to think of a plan, what is one point that is absolutely key for you personally to include in sort of a manifesto for this plan? What is something that in this vision that the European Bauhaus is framing, we have to take into consideration? And we come from different cultural backgrounds, different professions, different sectors. So if there's like one thing, what would that be?
To me, it was create symbiosis. It is possible. And stop parasitism.
I would say this value-based innovation, and I use these 3E, ecological, ethical, and aesthetical as part of these values, and so that must be promoted as part of the plan.
Through discussions before you start developing something so that you do it right.
And Dennis?
Well, for me, I will repeat the human need-driven innovation in a world with 11 billion people living flourishing lives, to really imagine what that kind of life is and make sure that we use not just the planet's resources, but half of that planet's resources to also live life for other living beings.
And Florian?
Let's create typical, creative, analog European products that people love.
Okay, I will end with my own utopia. Something that we have to remember to not be so is that in 2008, under the financial crisis of the 2008, actually culture was very severely hit, and cultural funding and the funding of culture, heritage, and the arts in Europe took a huge blow. In a way today, the fusion of research and the arts is creating like a new utopia, or a new pathway to reevaluate the very important importance of culture and the arts in our common values, but also in the way that we mean and forge the future. So I wish that actually in these new utopias or heterotopias, we never really forget the value of culture and that it has in the center of our lives, mostly when we have challenges as big as the ones that we have. I want to thank every one of you for being here today and everyone following us at home. This has been a beautiful Saturday, sunny morning in Brussels. Thanks for joining us and for keeping thinking in terms of this new heterotopia that we are building together and maybe projecting to the world of the world and the values that the idea of the new European Bauhaus may represent. Thank you very much.
And I want to thank you for being here.
And thank you.
And I want to thank all of you for being here. So thank you so much for that. And I totally agree, by the way, with that of protecting arts and innovation. That's part of the European identity for sure. And the sun came out, which is good, but now we're gonna let you take a little break. We'll be back at 12:45. We have a keynote by Professor Carlos Moreno, who is, as you know, an icon on this field. So that's one that I really wanna watch personally myself. So we're now gonna take that little break, both online, but also here. Enjoy the sun, lunch, and we'll see you at 12:45. Thank you so much. Very nice. Thank you very much. It was great. Appreciate it.
Hold up.